Putting the P in passenger experience, except in the worst possible way. That's the headline that Air India has grabbed. Very, very unfortunate, but that's what 2023 has brought for the airline that now belongs to the Tata Group. Now, the businessman based in Bangalore, accused of urinating on an elderly woman in the business class cabin of an Air India flight from New York to Delhi, is still out there. We're told that the police is looking for him, but it has triggered an absolute explosion of questions. Did this really happen? How could someone do something like this? Does it say something about us as Indians? Why aren't there stricter rules? Is this about culture? Is it about enforcement? So here on the Democratic Newsroom, the first episode of 2023, I really wish that we had a better thing to talk about to start off the year. But here we are talking about urination in business class. Preeti, welcome. I've been on a business class flight maybe once or twice in my life. I don't know about you. This is the last thing anyone would expect. But I don't want to make too much light of the matter also, because this is disgusting. I want to first get to the root of how could something like this happen? In your mind, how could someone do something like this?
Well, in my mind, I don't know. We keep talking about business class. I don't think it's a class issue. It's just got a lot to do with the kind of person that you are. And enforcement is something that we've talked about earlier, Shiv. I think 30 days of flying for Air India, that's all this man has got.
Yeah.
Nothing at all. That's the level of enforcement. If it was that this person will not be eligible to fly off the flying list, that would have been enforcement enough or deterrent enough. But what's practically shocked me, and the others can weigh in on that, is the response of the crew and the pilot. There was an empty seat. There was an empty seat in the first class.
And the pilot apparently said you can't.
Pilot apparently said that you cannot, and she had to first sit on a urine-soaked business class seat, then move to a crew seat. She's a 70-year-old woman.
I'm actually wondering.
I'm appalled.
Siddharth, I'll come to you, because I'm sure you must have spoken to a lot of people in the wake of this stinking story. Is how could something like this? Let's go to the very basic of it. How could something like this happen? Is it really possible a guy gets so drunk in business class that he decides to relieve himself anywhere?
I've traveled quite.
I'm having a hard time, wrapping my head around that.
Absolutely, and I think there's a class bias. People in economy also get very drunk, and there have been ugly incidents in all cabins. They happen in trains also, in buses also, in auto rickshaws. But this gets you attention because it's obviously the class bias that we suffer as a society from. How did this man get so drunk? What exactly transpired? There are newer details coming out, but leaving that aside, I think center and square, the first thing is the response of the airline, the onboard crew, the pilot in command, and the management on the ground. That has been severely lacking, and as we speak, there is a latest set of guidelines that has been issued by Air India for cabin crew, and the word now being used is be assertive in dealing with unruly customers. But I think there was a clear failure in dealing with the aftermath of the incident on behalf of the airline.
I'll come to the aftermath in part B, because I want to focus on this individual named Shankar Mishra for a moment. And remember, we here don't judge. We're reporting what is coming out as part of this investigation. Akshata, words like entitlement, lack of fear for the law, people wanting to maximize the amount of money they pay on a business class flight, so they drink so much that they can't hold their own bladders. What is it to you? What do you think it was?
I think it's
because it's such a distant possibility, someone unzipping their pants and peeing in business class.
I think essentially that the person was so inebriated that he didn't realize where the washroom is.
That's drunk.
Because if you look at the statement from the victim, he seated in front of her, literally got up, turned around, and relieved himself. But I also agree with Preeti in the sense that I don't think this is so much of a business class problem. I think this is around, but the question that we need to ask is, does it happen more often with flights that Indians are taking? If that's the case, then we really need to address it, because there's clearly a problem here that if you serve free alcohol, people are just going to lap it up. And if you talk about regulation, then there's the problem of people then attacking cabin crew, right? They'll target them saying, how can you stop me from drinking anymore? The victim herself has also raised a very important point, saying, why was he being served more alcohol? Despite being drunk, why was he being accommodated?
In business class, they tend not to stop serving
They don't
alcohol.
stop. They don't stop.
There
They
it's
keep,
like, since
I think
you paid
periodically
so much
coming
money,
in.
how can they not serve you alcohol?
Every few hours they come in with a tray and give you whatever you want, right? So there's no stopping. It's free flowing. It's free. you've paid the ticket, and with that comes the alcohol, is the assumption. And most people, you know, I'm not sure where Shankar Mishra really came from, whether he thought he's going to have a good nap, but this was the opposite of that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I do feel that, and my question is this a problem that Indians suffer from? Or is this something that's seen on all international flight routes?
I don't think Indians suffer from
because
this
there are
problem,
two
because
incidents.
there are so many instances, like we were talking about also, Shiv, on this person defecating that flight. Actually, I didn't know about it, Siddharth, you just mentioned.
Was an African, I
Was
think.
an African, and this was years ago, irrespective. But there are several instances. So one argument that let Indians not drink on flights, or let there be a ban on alcohol on international flights, I think that makes no sense, because it happens everywhere. It's just that it's so bizarre and so disgusting that we are discussing it right here. But it's not just Indians doing this. In fact, I've seen just so many Americans who are much more unruly than us, and it happens all the time.
And the thing about these 3 or 4 videos that have come in the recent past of Indians being obnoxious on planes is going to obviously it's going to lead to a degree of racism. Debate, right? I've already seen it on social media.
But if you talk to cabin crew, for example, many of them will talk about how the India circuit is more unruly. Right?
And
most of them,
they don't want to
it's
fly
undeniable. You have to talk about basic etiquette
yeah.
being followed. It doesn't happen. I think any of us who have flown will agree that there is a problem, that we need to address this.
You know, Polomi can come in on this in terms of, I would think it's enforcement, because there is a sense, you talk to most air hostesses, cabin crew, stewards, the first thing they'd say is that yes, whether we like it or not, most Indian sectors, especially foreign crew, doesn't want to take. That's their last on their bidding priority.
And it has nothing to do with racism.
And it has nothing to do with racism. It's purely bad behavior. Now, is it, Polomi, is it enforcement? 30 days ban, that's it?
But
this man gets away with it?
That's the rule. That's the rule.
That's the rule.
That's the rule in the DGCA.
Yeah.
Unilaterally, the airline can apply a maximum of 30 days ban. Subsequent to that, other airlines can also choose to optionally ban the individual or put the individual based on his experience. Happened in the case of Kunal Kamra. You put them on a no-fly list
for
as
6
well.
months.
You can, depending. There are levels of unruly behavior, depending on which level of unruly behavior.
Heckling is higher at exposing themselves and seeing on someone.
The airline can do so much, and then it goes forward.
Kunal Kamra was put away for 6 months.
Level 1, which is again unruly behavior based on you being drunk, verbally abusive, etc., etc.
But this is sexual harassment.
This is sexual harassment. So there is level 2. This is level 2. As far as I am concerned, because you exposed yourself, you unzipped yourself before a woman passenger.
What is level 3?
Level 3 is like you basically like.
I'm guessing there are no rules for urination, right?
I think most Indians are horrified, Siddharth, to bring you in on this, that this guy wasn't handed over to the police as soon as the aircraft landed. You know, most people are thinking a person urinating on another passenger inside an aircraft, is many steps beyond what is acceptable. Forget about, whether or not he should be handed over to the police. Why didn't that happen?
Shiv, as
you reported earlier today, the Air India chief has sent out an email saying it's more complicated. What's complicated about it?
Well, I think if you sort of break it up, Air India has been maintaining on and off the record that there is more to the case. And as we see the latest WhatsApp chats which is being released by the accused side and the lawyers, and they put out a detailed statement where they have in fact used the word, it's merely hearsay, and that a settlement has been reached, and they also accuse this lady of condoning the act. Now, I'm not getting into the legal semantics, but there are WhatsApp chats where it seems to me that perhaps the crew got misled on air during the flight, that the two parties have reached a compromise. Now here it's very clear that when it comes to aviation safety, why are we more conscious about unruly incidents on flight? Because there is potential risk to endanger that flight. It's in the air. This is not a train or a bus that you can break side mein, bhai sahab utro niche baad mein jhagda karna. It cannot happen during a flight, and that to a long.
My only contention to that.
Now let me just finish that point. The crew misjudged the situation. Now this is my assessment. They perhaps much more may come out later, which will force me to revisit my conclusion. They misjudged, and regardless of the compromise, if at all that had been reached, they should have done what is proper, which is hand it over to the regulatory authorities, which is now the latest directive from the Air India management to all cabin crew and the pilot in command.
But they only did it because this lady complained.
Yes.
Otherwise, they were hoping that it
happened. But they're calling that an afterthought. They're calling that an afterthought. So first,
apparently,
she did, so basically her daughter returns the money that he Paytms her, 15,000 rupees.
And then
on
gets the
December
mother to
19th,
send out the letter.
December 20 is when the complaint is lodged
Right.
with Air India. So it's an afterthought. The daughter probably thought, Mom, you can't be accepting this.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
obnoxious. We have to
Which
have
is
this
fair, right? You can't
pulled
expect
up.
them to be like ready with a response
And
first.
this lady
Second
suffered a traumatizing shock.
Yeah.
No, and 10,000
She was,
rupees and
I
dry
have a very
cleaning and stuff.
basic question in this. One very basic question. What has happened on board your airline, which is the Air India? How is it between two people, even if they've reached a compromise?
Exactly.
I have a very basic question.
How is it left to them?
It's not about a compromise. It's not about
Yeah.
between
You
two
look at
people.
They have no
Whether
right
or
to
not she
defend.
lodged,
The
whether or
second
not
case
she
which
lodged
we
a complaint or
reported
not,
about,
it is entirely
100%
there's
agree.
sexual harassment and
Yeah.
various natures of somebody urinating.
The tragic bit,
Also,
Preeti, is the
it's not
failure. The
between two
tragic
people.
bit is also that because of the way a lot of this Sarkari airline has been abused by freeloaders in the past, that the fact that the pilot in command and the senior crew on board did not make the rest of the flight comfortable for
I was
this
about to
lady.
say that.
Yeah.
That is the
Even
tragic
if
bit.
compromise,
This is not the Air India.
It comes down to enforcement, as
I
you
spoke to
said.
someone, a former officer, and he said this is the tragic fall of Air India. In the past, the pilot in command is the boss of the flight. He
I don't
could have
get it.
helped her.
Maybe Polomi can throw more light on this. Why would the pilot veto the option of her being comfortably seated in first class? I don't get that.
And when you heard she's been
When,
urinated
when,
upon.
when you heard she's been urinated upon.
There is a lot of answering that the crew of this flight has
Yes.
to do.
And you
A
know, they
lot of
forced the
answering.
settlement,
They
because if
have
you see
not
the victim
followed their
statement-
own manual. It's in their own manual. Forget the DGCA rules.
Yeah.
Their own manual hasn't been followed, and this is
What
completely
is the manual
catastrophic.
that's not been followed in the
Basically, you need to report it. You need to report. It was not reported.
The DGCA.
And you know,
Lloyd's
when,
report.
when it
On
comes to
foreign
enforcement,
flights,
when
foreign
you
flights,
arrived at a compromise, that's the
passengers
reason
are
why.
subdued and bound to their seats.
in the second case, December 6th, this is November 26th, we're talking about Shankar
was
Mishra.
handled much
December
better.
6th, the pilot did report it
Yeah.
to the central control. Okay, this guy was apprehended by the CISF upon arrival.
second incident.
Second
Yeah.
incident. He was apprehended upon arrival. He had peed on the blanket of the woman passenger.
She wasn't even on the
Okay,
seat, I think.
yeah, and again, compromise, settlement, CISF lets him go.
But that was a written apology.
What
There
is-
was a
I
mutual
just-
compromise.
I don't
She
get
chooses
what
not
is
to
the
But I
communicate.
think that response was so much better than the first one because he was handed over to
At
the
least the
CISF.
airline and the PIC, the pilot in command, acted according to the law. He
Yeah.
reported the
No,
matter.
but
Reporting it to air
Sneha,
traffic control.
what Preeti says is absolutely right. I agree with that, which is that how is it being left to do these two people? There are other people surely in
Absolutely.
that business class who are similarly traumatized or affected by
Absolutely,
it.
it's not just the woman, and this is a criminal act.
Yeah.
It is a criminal act. How can there be a compromise? Even if there is a compromise, there has to be some sort of a conversation about some action being taken.
but
Air
something
India
has to
has
be motor cognizance, right?
But let's take
Where
note,
did that come
let's
from?
take note of the fact that the government acted.
Simple.
That the government, the former owner of Air India, acted.
Yeah.
We must take note of the fact that Jyotiraditya Scindia lodged a complaint. This matter wouldn't have reached a police probe stage. And also the fact that at some point, some of these emerging violations will now have to move from a no-fly
Yeah.
to a never-fly list.
Yeah, yeah.
The fact that there isn't a never-fly option that has been handed over to
You
this
have to
man,
put the fear of God
I think
in
that's
people's
the
heart,
big
yeah.
I want to know what sort of
See-
action is going to be taken against the crew members. They should have left no stone
And the
unturned
pilot, and the pilot.
to make this poor woman comfortable. I mean,
That's
that's
the least you can
basic.
do. It's the
That's
least
the
you
base.
can
That's
do
the
after what
least
she
they could have
suffered.
done.
Yeah.
What sort of action is going to be taken against them?
Is any action going to be taken against the crew and the pilots?
Well, there is an internal committee which the airline has formed, so they will be looking into it. And
Is this pilot
it remains to
experienced, Polomi? Does he have enough
he
mileage?
flies New York, Delhi.
New York, Delhi would
So
be
he's
an
an
experienced
experienced pilot who's dealt with the
Oh, no, this is the
situations.
most
I-
premium
I'm
flight.
just-
This is the most important flight.
It's a non-stop
It's
flight,
one
right?
of, it's
JFK
the second
Delhi
longest
Someone who
flight.
reports on the sector and has seen all kinds of incidents, this has been extremely shocking that nobody, in fact, and Air India,
Has that pilot
to
been
say that,
de-rostered?
oh, we reported it to DGCA and DGCA comes out and says, no, we picked it up from the media.
Exactly.
You did not even report it to the
Exactly.
DGCA. What the hell were
Has
you
the
doing?
pilot and the crew been de-rostered yet, or are they
No.
still flying?
Nothing,
Oh,
no
they're still
action.
flying. Wow.
Imagine that.
That's
And
the
you know,
thing.
it was clear that they were trying to cover it up because if you see the woman's statement, she says, I didn't want to meet him.
So-
I didn't want to meet him after what he did to me. And despite that, they ensured
and
that
remember,
they met because so he could
This is
apologize
an old
and cry.
lady. She's traveling alone from the facts of the
Yeah.
case. She's obviously traumatized. She's not in the
the
right
physical and the
decision-making
mental trauma.
faculty.
Yeah.
There is mental trauma. Clearly, the airline has failed spectacularly
Yeah.
in this
And
regard. There is no.
Unless the daughter would
this-
have If the daughter would have not intervened, I think nobody would have even gotten to know
if what
about this.
happened was bad, the airline's response made it 10 times worse.
The suggestion that, this old lady settled, therefore we didn't want to do anything is rubbish. Like what Siddharth said. She was an old lady, she was traumatized.
And she says the cabin crew refused to touch her stuff after he urinated on it.
No, it infuriates me. If it was my mother's exactly the same age.
Mine too.
If it was my mother on that sector, it infuriates me more than the man in question. I am angry at the staff, I'm angry at the pilot. How dare they make a woman who's 70 years old, senior citizen, sit in a cabin crew seat for 2 hours? She's drenched in urine. Her own seat is,
This is a legacy of Sarkari Air India, where very strict rules which prevent the pilot in command from taking decisions on the spot were in place in the past. I don't know what the new owners have done, but on foreign airlines, just to complete that, on foreign airlines, if you have a seat that is malfunctioning, I have seen people getting upgraded on the spot.
Absolutely.
In Air India, it doesn't happen because there is a lot of CAG, Sarkar, ye, inquiry, free ka,
malfunction.
मैं MLA का भाई, मेरे ताऊ MP, ये सब, there's still that hangover.
No longer Sarkari, but the mindset
is.
Are also about whether nothing changed for Air India. Has nothing changed for Air India?
No, the ownership has changed, but the culture is still
the DNA is the
progress.
same.
What about the crew members? Is this still the G Hazuri, attitude that you are the passenger, you can never be wrong?
But G Hazuri to an extent must be happening in business class anyway.
Yes, but we've seen recent instances of, air hostesses give it back to the passenger. Shut them up. And one of the passengers called
Air
the air
India
hostess
in itself is going through a massive upheaval, but nothing condones what happened on this flight. I mean, this is part of protocol which if you were Sarkari or you're part of a Tata Group company, you should just know.
No, because the
protocol,
Tata Group is a group that sort of prides itself on culture and integrity
and that's why
and things like that.
Why did this case come out? After it was escalated to the chairman of the Tata Group, and then he put things in motion. So let's give credit to the new owner.
No,
they can't control everything.
Most of the comments right now are, is this what Tatas mean by revamp of
I think that's very unfair.
Look, I think that's unfair.
Very
I think that's unfair. The onus of scrutiny and whatever action needs to be taken needs to be on A, the perpetrator, and B, the crew. Like Preeti said, the focus of people's dismay right now needs to be on the negligence and how they handle it. The damage is terribly done.
They need to do something to the cabin crew.
The lack of faith, we can call it entitlement, we can call it ingrained culture of Indians, so many things. But the fact is, there is a degree of fearlessness of action. People in general feel that, utna to nahi hoga. Nothing, I won't be in that much trouble.
Ab tum jante ho mera bhai kaun hai? That kind of thing.
No, isn't it also a bit of that?
Yeah. But that's why I question about what I started off with, about Indians.
No fear of the law. No fear
about
of the
Indians
law.
and how they are as flyers. Because of this, no fear of the law. They don't believe in following basic etiquette. They're like, we'll do what we want.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. There are very clear rules when you're, up in the air. That doesn't clearly, sink in.
I'll give you a basic example.
I think there are a lot of first-time flyers. Now, this is very dangerous territory that I'm venturing into. There are a lot of first-time flyers.
Who don't know how to behave.
They perhaps, I would qualify it, they perhaps do not know the specific etiquette required for a flight. But I think we shouldn't kind of make it...
So in that sense, I tend to agree with Siddharth.
It's not a societal thing. It's happened all over the world.
No, I agree. Where 80% of India, Siddharth, pees on the road. And that's acceptable. It's a fact of life. Then it doesn't matter whether you have the money or not. You will do what you've done before. And I'll give you an example, because if you look at it, even when masks, Polumi, when they were introduced, that you had to, it was mandatory. During COVID. The first couple of months there wasn't any fine. When airlines started cracking the whip and started fining people, everyone
It's the only way to change culture.
Enforcement,
that's it.
Like 10 times more than perhaps others. You need to ensure that here. Because other people don't follow.
I hope, because all of us have been on Air India, and I'm sure we've all had good experiences and some not so good experiences. Thankfully, none of us were on this particular flight. Last word, Siddharth.
Last word is, and I'm going to bet that there is never any chance, which Mr. Vijay Mallya had tried, the king of good times, to get kingfishers on board. That is never happening. There is never going to be any alcohol on domestic flights.
Forget about
I don't drink, but I guess those who were looking forward to it, that's gone through the window.
I'm for sure going to be sleeping with one eye open whenever I fly now. I'm not trusting anyone next to me, front of me, behind me, nothing.
It's when it comes down to entitlement, when it comes down to culture, I always say that India is a country unlike any other. Enforcement here is a is a proposition of such scale that it is sometimes daunting. It's easy to talk about culture, easy to talk about enforcement in India. It's a difficult thing to do, but it must be done. All cultures, I firmly believe, and this is the last word, that culture can be changed if people fear that there will be repercussions for their actions. It's happened in other countries in the world. There's no reason why it shouldn't happen here in India. We'll keep you posted on what happens in business class.